Meanwhile, Palestinians in Bethlehem have been able to mark a Christmas. Let's now speak to Xavier Abu Eid. He's a political scientist and former communication advisor to the PLO. Hi there, Javier, and a Merry Christmas to you. I know that it's a bit of a bittersweet moment because although it's such a holy day for Christians around the world, particularly in Bethlehem, it's still coupled with the knowing that there are still so many suffering not that far away in Gaza. How are Palestinians in Bethlehem celebrating this day, and what are they saying about the ongoing violence taking place in Gaza and the occupied West Bank?
Thank you. Merry Christmas for everyone celebrating from Bethlehem. Uh, the fact that we're almost 100 kilometers from Gaza, of course, it's always present here in Bethlehem. And the fact that there is an ongoing genocide in Gaza, of course, it's something that people did not forget. But also, it's important to understand that here in Bethlehem, surrounded by 22 illegal Israeli colonial settlements, by over 150,000 Israeli settlers, by the Israeli army. Just a couple of days ago, we had a Palestinian child nearby Bethlehem that was killed by Israeli forces. So, in other words, if there is a place in the occupied West Bank that you cannot forget that you live under occupation, is here in Bethlehem. And yet, people went out to the streets, they tried to celebrate. It was a rather quiet Christmas in Bethlehem. However, people show that they have this message of resilience from the birthplace of Christ.
You say it was a quiet moment for Palestinians celebrating there because for the last 2 years, they haven't really come out. The Christmas tree hasn't been put up, but we see that now. We see tourists returning to the area to celebrate. And when we talk about resistance from Palestinians, are celebrations like these, are the joy that they can experience and outlay on a day like this also a form of resistance against the occupation?
Certainly, and I don't think the Israeli occupation was very happy to see that Palestinians were still celebrating, even though Bethlehem has suffered a lot over the past 2 years. Bethlehem largely depends on tourism that almost disappeared. What we've had over the Christmas season is something like 10% of the occupancy rates that the hotels had before the genocide started in Gaza. And now we basically have people here from Palestinian citizens of Israel, or what are known here in Palestine as Palestinians from 48. There are very few tourists that made it to Bethlehem in this season. And I think it's important to understand that even though Palestinians in Bethlehem are prepared to receive more and more people, the situation on the ground and around Bethlehem it does not encourage tourism a lot. And let's remember, I think that's a very important point, that Israel has utter control over all accesses to Bethlehem and all access to Palestine. And therefore, it adds an obstacle, even though I think people that make it to Palestine and make it to Bethlehem, they don't regret coming here and seeing the Palestinian people on the ground.
Do you think those tourists, especially international tourists who are coming, really understand the political reality of people living in the occupied regions and those who for 2 years really haven't been able to celebrate days like these?
This is a very important point because when we say that Israel has a virtual monopoly over tourism, it reflects, for example, on the fact that they control the narrative that most of those tourists are going to go through. Some Palestinian tour guides are even scared to talk about the situation on the ground because they may lose the very few permits. By the way, now there are no Palestinian tour guides with permits to work on the other side, including in occupied East Jerusalem. But let's say that according to signed agreements between the PLO and Israel, there should be freedom of movement for Palestinian tour guides. And what we've had over the past years is that over 7,000 Israeli tour guides are able to work in occupied Jerusalem, but only 42 Palestinian tour guides have got permits up until October the 7th in order to work there. So Israel tries to control the narrative. And I think it's also important that in the control of the narrative, they try to make a very exclusive Holy Land. It's just a matter of going to the Mount of Olives, for example, in Jerusalem, where you have an overview of the old city, where the first thing you see is Al-Aqsa Mosque in front of you. And if you listen to the narrative that Israeli tour guides present to visitors, it's as almost Islam and Christianity were not part of this land.
Thank you very much, Xavier Abu Eid. Appreciate it.